I couldn't sleep last night, so I was laying there thinking about creativity. Is there original thought? How can I come up with a card that showcases true creativity? And then I realized that in my 10 years of being a mom, the most creative thing I've seen is what my children wear. I'm sure you can relate. So these cards are going to be based on whatever random thing my kids throw on tomorrow morning. Let's do it. Hello, it's Carrie at Inkhill Revival. Today I'm going to show you how to make these 2 cards inspired by my 2 girls and their lovely outfits. Let's start off with the girls' roll card. Such a fun outfit, turned out to be such a fun card too. This one's all about color and texture. There's that bright coral, the woven blue jean, and the fun black rainbow sparkle. Although I didn't have perfect matches, you just work with what you've got. So here I'm creating my own coral colored paper, blending some Hero Arts pale tomato ink onto white 65-pound cardstock. It's cut to 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inches. Next, I'm ready to run this coral colored paper through my die cut machine. I'm using an Altenew edge die, and I've lined it up with that point just a bit to one side to give some asymmetry. And you gotta love mistakes. As soon as it's cut, I see I grabbed the wrong edge die, and the nice stitch cuts are actually on the scrap, but I'm using it still. Next, I need to figure out how to make paper look like jean. I do have some blue paper that I'm going to start the process off with, thanks to this super handy 12x12 paper pad. It's Craftsmith from Michaels. It's basically a big book of paint chips. It's got all sorts of colors and plenty of shades within each of the colors. And I'm not one who owns very many colored paper options, so this pad just saves me time and time again. Now I'm ready to stamp some texture onto this paper. I'm using the Stampin' Up! Canvas background stamp. This is a good old garage sale find. And yep, I'm using a tiny little distress ink cube to ink up a huge background stamp, but it's the best jean color I had. And even though distress inks stamp blotchy, they're really not intended to be used as a stamping ink. Jeans are blotchy, so it's gonna be perfect. At this point, I see the paper is not quite dark enough to really look like jean, so I'm going to take some of that same Stormy Sky distress ink and blend some on just over the whole paper. Since I'm planning to emboss on this next, I need to make sure that it's completely dry, all that distress ink. So I've hit it with my heat tool, and then I'm actually testing out by pouring on some embossing powder to check if it sticks to the distress ink. And it did, so did a little more drying before I was ready to move on with my stamping and embossing. I'm gonna be stamping with this Birthday Girl from the Sassy Club Happy Day stamp set. I love this stamp for a girl's roll birthday card because she's wearing a crown and she's got a birthday cake. It's everything we need for this card. I'm using VersaFine Onyx Black ink here because it's a nice sticky ink that the embossing powder will stick to. So right after stamping, I'm pouring on some Hero Arts Sparkle embossing powder and melting it with my heat gun. This is a great embossing powder. It has, I guess, iridescence to it. There's a rainbow look when the light hits it. It's fun. It's perfect. Same kind of thing as my daughter's shirt. And speaking of which, it's time to make the letters from my daughter's shirt. I don't actually have black sparkle paper that's quite as perfect as this embossing powder, so I'm just going to use that embossing powder and make my own paper. Right here, I'm rubbing on more of that VersaFine Onyx Black ink onto black paper. I could have used a Versamark ink, just a clear embossing ink, but I couldn't find it anywhere, and this was already out. Next, I'm pouring that embossing powder over the whole inked area and melting it with my heat gun. Gotta be careful when doing this big of an area. You can see I burned some spots from holding the heat tool over one area for too long. Also, preheating the heat gun for a little bit before taking it to the paper is going to help prevent the burns. Next, I'm running this crazy shiny paper that I love through my die cut machine. I'm using W+9 Whimsy Alpha dies to spell out Girls Roll. And yes, there's no I, but that is because there was no I on the shirt. These dies are one of my all-time best purchases. I have used them so many times again and again over the years, and I love them. They have a coordinating stamp set as well, but often I just use the dies. I want these letters to really stand out, so I'm going to be layering additional cut letters behind them. And so thus begins the arduous task of cutting out many letters and gluing many letters. I've got 4 of each letter, 3 plain black ones, and 1 glitter embossed letter. I'm gluing them together using a Zig 2-way glue pen. Since I'm on a roll with the glue anyways, I'm getting these letters attached to the coral piece. Now here's where I'm playing it safe, and I'm stamping my happy birthday inside the card, the blank card, before I attach anything to the front of the card, because I've messed up cards too many times with my inner stamping. I really should pull out my Misty and just use that, but I didn't. And by the way, this happy birthday stamp is from the Year 2 Lawn Fawn stamp set. Okay, so now I'm worried about that VersaFine ink transferring to the other side of my inner card, so I'm sticking in a scratched piece of paper while I assemble the front. Because wouldn't that just be ironic if I ruined it anyways? I'm attaching the jean piece to the card base using my tape runner. But I want the coral piece to have some dimension, so I'll attach it with double-sided foam tape, which always ends up being a process for me. It's like, little more, not quite, little more. It's like backing up my car from a tight spot. You guys have any tricks to keep me from pulling my hair out every time I use foam tape? All right, we just need a little cherry on top here. I'm gonna use this cute black confetti piece. It's actually a little clay piece from the High Confetti Black and White Heart Mix. And this card is done. Okay, next up, we're gonna make this sweet baby card inspired by my crazy baby. I'm starting off prepping the card background, and I want this to end up looking like the tiers of my baby's dress. So I'm cutting some pink cardstock to 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inches, and then I'll take 2 of those pieces and cut them down shorter and shorter so that the 3 pieces can stack together and all be visible. So in the end here, I have 1 piece that's 1.75 inches by 5 1/2, another that's 3 inches by 5 1/2, and the final is still 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. Next, I am taking each of these pieces and using an EK Success dotted scallop edger punch to create this decorative edge, just to define the layers more. I'll be using this welcome stamp from the Hero Arts Welcome Sweet Little One set. And since I want to stamp the sentiment on the second tier, I'm going to set all 3 tiers up here in my Misty so that I can get the placement just right. And I decided to not be lazy this time, and I actually pulled out my Misty. Since I'm using this fairly big stamp, I want to be able to double stamp it just to get a real solid impression here. Now I'm ready to get this card dirty. My baby is absolutely addicted to the backyard, and she's covered in dirt all day, every day. Today was no different, so I'm gonna put some dirt on this pink dress card. So to do that, I'm rubbing some Black Soot Distress ink onto an acrylic block, adding some water to it, and flicking it off the block onto the card here with the paintbrush. You never quite know how something like this is going to turn out. That's hard if you're kind of OCD like me, but just go for it. It really does end up looking better if you put your controlling tendencies aside. Okay, now we're ready to get the sentiment banner and flowers prepped for the card. So I'm using these stamps from the Mom and Dad stamp set from Avery L. and using Memento Tuxedo Black ink. This is a Copic friendly ink so that when I color with my Copics, it's not going to bleed or smudge at all. On to the coloring here. Now, I did play around ahead of time to come up with some color combos I liked, and I wanted to try to as closely match my daughter's dress as possible because this stamp set amazingly looked just like the flowers on her dress. I like to plan my colors ahead of time so that when I sit down and color, it's just more enjoyable. I can relax, know it's gonna turn out good, and just enjoy the coloring. So to pick my color combos, I will either just test out some swatches on paper or I'll actually stamp the image. That's what I did this time, and just do some test petals on it, test leaves, or even color some completely. And then I just put these into a bucket for my kids, and they love to use the pre-colored pictures. And it's good coloring practice as well. Also, you'll notice the order I like to do my Copic coloring in is from light to dark, and then back to light. And so I'll put down my very lightest color, except in the case of this flower that I'm doing, ironically. But usually I'll put down my lightest color and then my very darkest color, and then I'll work back up through to the lightest color to complete the blend. In the case of that orange purple center flower, I started with my lightest color and then went to kind of my medium orange color, and I ended it with the very darkest color, and that's because I wanted my dark marks to stand out. I did not want to complete a blend on top of them. But in the rest of the flowers and leaves on this card, you'll notice the pattern of light, very lightest, to very darkest, and then sometimes I'll come back with a medium shade, like right here, and then ease into the very lightest shade to complete the blending. Okay, so here I'm using a glitter pen to just add a bit of sparkle onto the berries. Okay, now I'm ready to get a sentiment stamped onto the banner. I'm going to be using the same Hero Arts Welcome Sweet Little One stamp set for this. You can see that the banner has a bit of a curve, and of course the stamp was not intended to be used here. So after placing the stamp on the acrylic block, I am basically molding it and resticking it so that it has the same curvature as the banner. This is a great trick for whenever you'd like to stamp with a curve. Now I'm getting these ready to send through my die cut machine. Just getting the dies lined up and sticking it down with low tack tape so they don't move around when they go through the die cut machine. Okay, with all the bits of the card prepped, I'm onto assembling the tiers. So I'm going to just be using a tape runner along the top and the sides of the tiers. But along that bottom edge, I'm going to use a thin strip of good old foam tape. And this is so that I can create more dimension between each of the layers. I really want each of them to pop. I'll keep on doing this for the next layer, and then that final layer, I ultimately just use the tape runner on all sides, but I do wish I had made the third final tier pop as well. Okay, almost done. I'm just getting ready here to attach the banner and the flower grouping. So with that flower grouping, because half of it is on the popped up second tier, I just need to use some tape runner right there, and I'll put the foam tape just where it overlaps with that lower tier, the bottom tier. And this will keep it flat. So I've got that on there, and now I'll just tuck the banner right underneath, and there you have it. It's a messy little baby dress card. Well, thanks for hanging out with me today. Be sure to visit the Inkhill Revival blog. It's linked in the YouTube description below. You're going to find a full list of the supplies I used, plus some supply swaps, so that if you want to make this, you can use what you already have. Also, what else are you going to make? Or who else are you going to make? Tell me about it in the comments. I'd love to hear who you picked and what they wore.